Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we're doing another top 10 list, and today's top 10 list talks about my top 10 favorite dice games. Games that involve dice in some way or another as the main mechanism or one of the main mechanisms. And dice are one of the most recognizable things about board games to the wider audience. When people think about board games, they're thinking about cards, and they're thinking about dice, maybe meeples. But yeah, dice are definitely one of the main things that people think about when it comes to board games. And over the years, designers have done some interesting things with dice to make them a little bit more recognizable for those, or distinguishable from each of the other games. So we're going to talk about my 10 favorite games that talk about or use dice in some interesting way, but I'm not going to be talking about any games that are dice worker placement games, or else there would probably be like 4 or 5 dice worker placement games on here, because that's one of my favorite mechanisms. So we're excluding all the dice worker placement games. And before we get into my favorite 10, I want to talk about a couple honorable mentions, 4 to be exact, very quickly. First, there's Caro, which is this dice game, dice chucking game. It's a real-time game, very hectic, rolling dice as fast as you can to try and get certain symbols in order to use them. It's almost like a Euro-style dice throwing game. It's very interesting, very fun. Another two-player only game, Caro's a two-player only game, is Kingdomino Duel, which just makes Kingdomino a roll and write game, a two-player game, and it's a dice drafting game. Really fun. I actually like it more than the original Kingdomino. I just think it works really well. Third game is Fuse, which is another real-time dice chucking game. This is a cooperative game. You're trying to roll certain things in order to defuse bombs. It's very, very hectic, very chaotic, a lot of fun. And the last game is a bigger game. This is Teotihuacan City of Gods. This is almost a dice worker placement game, because your workers that you're moving around the board are dice, but you're taking one of the dice that's on the board and moving them to a new location so many spots away, and then upgrading that dice to a higher number. And then when they eventually die as they get older. And yeah, but very, very fun game. It's part of the T series. Those are the honorable mentions. Now let's get into my actual top 10 list, and let's start with number 10, of course. Number 10 is Dinosaur Island Rawr and Write, which is a dice drafting roll and write game, and it's just a re-implementation of the original Dinosaur Island, but it makes it into a small, I shouldn't even say small, but a smaller version of that game using the roll and write mechanic. And you're going to be drafting dice that get you dinosaur DNA, that get you roads, that get you different abilities, and you're going to have to plan and strategically place out these dinosaurs, making their enclosures, and you have to plan. This is a game you just have to plan everything. You're like, in the future, I need to build this building here, but I got to make sure I've got a room for it. It's just a lot of fun. It's definitely replaced Dinosaur Island for me, because it takes up a fifth of the footprint that Dinosaur Island does. I like Dinosaur Island, but it just takes up too much room. So number 10 was Dinosaur Island Rawr and Write, which is a newer sort of game. The first two games on this list are newer-ish games. The next one is Cubitos, which came out 2021, I believe. And this is a dice building game. Sorry, there is some annoying birds off in the background, but Cubitos is a dice building game, much like a deck building game, but you're going to be building just your hand of dice, basically, and just going to be chucking these dice. And it's this push your luck race game that uses these dice. And these dice, you're going to either move around the map with the dice's actions, or you're going to be buying new dice. And these dice they're going to be better, bigger things, and they're going to be very interesting. There's a lot of variability, because there's a lot of different dice that you can put into this game and switch in and out. It's just a very intro gamer friendly sort of race game that I've really liked, and it's one that I don't own, so I've only played it I think 4 times, but I've really liked it every single time. Let's go to number 8. Number 8 is a game that I've talked about plenty on this channel. This is Thanos Rising Avengers Infinity War, which is a cooperative game. It's a dice allocation game where you're going to be rolling dice, and then you're going to be assigning these dice to either a hero to try and recruit them and bring them into your tableau, or onto a villain, a bad guy, in order to take them out. and remove them from the game. And it's really interesting because you're putting these dice on these heroes, and then it's like an engine building game, because the more heroes you have, the more dice you're going to probably get, the more special abilities you get, and so each turn becomes more and more epic. You get better and better as the game goes on, hopefully, if you're doing well in this game. Yeah, it's one of my favorite games. It's a good game in a series of games, the Rising series. So yeah, number 8, Thanos Rising, Avengers Infinity War. Going to number 7. Number 7 is an abstract game. This is Noctiluca. This is a game, you have a ton of dice out onto this board in different specific sections of this board. And you're going to take one of your wooden pawns and place it in one of these rows, and you're going to take the dice of one number in either the column or the row, and you're going to take those dice and assign them onto your little specific mission cards, little objectives, trying to fill those out. And if you take some dice that you can't use, they go to your neighbors. It's, like I said, an abstract game, and it's one of my favorite abstract games, and it's by Shem Phillips. It's a really wonderful game that when I played it, I'm like, yeah, it's neat, it's cool, and I thought it would fade away, but I've owned it for a few years now, maybe 3 years, I can't remember, and I still really enjoy when I break this out, either as a multiplayer game or even as a solo game. So number 7, Noctiluca. Let's go to number 6. Number 6 is a bigger game. This is Roll Player. This is a dice drafting game where the game is you are basically building out a D&D character sheet, and you have a specific character that you want specific stats for. You don't want all your stats to be super, super high. You want them to be whatever that character's stat sheet is. So if your one row is a 15, you want all your dice in that row to equal 15 to get some more bonus points. And throughout the game, you're drafting these dice, getting different special abilities for putting the dice in certain sections. You're also going to get special abilities for equipment and gear that you have along the way. A really fun game, and I really like the theme. I thought that was very clever, making a game out of building a D&D character. That's pretty cool. Number 6, so that's number 6, Roll Player. Going to number 5. Number 5 has got a spot in my heart. This is King of Tokyo. Why it's got a spot in my heart is because this is the game that I've played with my kid more than any other game. My kid doesn't play too many games with me, but back in the day, we broke out King of Tokyo a lot. Like, it was a weekly occurrence with me, my son, my nephew, maybe my sisters. Fun little dice chucking game where each player plays as a monster, and you're rolling dice, trying to damage other monsters or get points even. But the funner thing is for us is we're always trying to take each other out, and it's a pretty fast game. Last monster standing wins. It's King of Tokyo, number 5. Let's go to number 4. Number 4 is a small little roll and write, and I was kind of surprised that it was this high up, but it's a game that's pretty clever, or Ganshan clever. It's a game that I've played more than any other game, I think, ever, because I have played this game hundreds and hundreds of times on the app. I mean, I play the physical version every once in a while, but it's pretty much like a daily occurrence for me. I'll break out the app if I got like an extra couple minutes, and I'll play that quick, and it takes a couple minutes on the app. Good to go. Basically, you're going to be rolling dice, drafting those dice then, or taking one of those dice and assigning it, marking off a certain section on your sheet according to that color. And what makes this game really, really fun is all the combos that you get in it. You mark off this section, which lets you mark off a section in orange, which might let you mark off a section in yellow. And it's just comboing things back and forth and trying to figure out that puzzle the best you can throughout the game is just something that I've really enjoyed over the years. So that was number 4. That's pretty clever. Going to number 3. Number 3 is Space. In this game, you have a section of rockets in front of you labeled 2 through 12. And whoever's the start player is going to roll the dice, and they are either going to activate one ship as the sum of the dice rolled, or they're going to activate 2 ships as the 2 individual dice rolled. And everybody else can do the same thing on the ships that have been replaced before, basically. So I like this game because there's things that you do when it's not your turn. I really enjoy that because you're always paying attention to the other people when they're doing their turn, because by the end of the game, you're going to be getting more stuff on other people's turns than you are on your own turn a lot of times. And it's just I don't think the dice thing is particularly interesting, but it works so well that I have broken this game out many, many times over the years, and it's one of my all-time favorite games. So yeah, number 3, Space Base. Let's go to number 2, and like I said, Space Base, the dice thing wasn't that interesting. I think the dice in this game are maybe more interesting than any other dice game that I've ever played. This is Pioneer Days. This is a game that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's so good. I would say it's probably like a light medium game, but it's a dice drafting game. You're going to roll these dice, and the dice are going to be different colors, and they're going to have different actions on those dice. So when you roll those dice, you are going to choose one of those dice, and you're either going to take the action of that dice or the number of coins that action is listed for, or you are going to take the character, which is going to help you as like a tableau engine building character that is going to help you throughout the game or at the end of the game. So there's 3 different things you can do with those dice, but you're going to have to think about dice that your opponents want. You're going to have to think about the dice that is left over, because you roll one more than the number of players for this, and whatever dice is left over, that color's disaster track moves up. And there's 4 different disasters in this game, and the dice that doesn't get drafted, that colored section moves up 1 and gets close to activating a specific disaster. So you are planning in this game ahead, like this disaster is about to come, but you just have a lot of choices in this game of what dice you want to draft, what dice you don't want your opponents to have, what dice you don't want the track to move up on. There's just a lot of interesting choices in this game, and a game that like I said, it doesn't get talked about a lot. It's, I think, highly underrated. One of my favorite games. Yeah. So number 2 was Pioneer Days. Going to my number 1 dice game. My number 1 dice game is part of a system of games that I have loved for many, many years. This is Pandemic: The Cure, which it could have just been called Pandemic: The Dice Game. There is no board in this game, but there are 6 different locations on this board. There's just 6 different locations. There's no board. And basically, you're going to roll all these dice and put out dice on specific locations. And if ever there are more than 3 types of the color on a certain section, like on the other pandemics, there's going to be an epidemic, which is going to cause bad things to happen. Now, the actions you choose are determined by your own specific set of dice that each character gets, and they're specifically for that character. They're going to have different actions on them. You're going to roll those dice, and you can roll as many times as you want until you get the actions you want for that turn. But the catch is there are biohazard symbols on your dice, and these biohazards will move up this track. Every time you roll a biohazard, you take that dice and you set it aside, and you move up on this track, and it's going to cause bad things to happen along the way. So you can roll as many times as you want, but you're risking rolling these biohazard symbols, which are horrible for you. So I think this is the most luck-based pandemic game, but it is also the easiest game to set up. I mean, it's like a quick setup. It's pretty easy to learn, and it's fast to play. I can play this game in about 30 minutes. So this I would say is a filler pandemic game, but one that I really like, and I don't mind that it's more lucky or unlucky than the other pandemic games, because it's so fast and it's just a whole lot of fun rolling these dice. So yeah, number 1 was Pandemic: The Cure, my favorite dice game currently. And I just want to hear from everybody else. What is your favorite dice game? Any game that involves dice as one of the main mechanisms. And tell me about some of the games that were on my list if you would like. But either way, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me, Shane, at the board meeting in the future. Hope you all have an amazing day. Take care, everyone.